the topic for the discussion for the very closing panel. Learnings from the past and preparedness of the Indian conventional power plant industry to address the future challenges and opportunities. The discussion will be followed by a question and answer session. The moderator for this discussion will be Mr. Siddharth Zarabi, senior economic journalist who was also our moderator for the first session in the morning. Our panelists for this session would be, I will be introducing them and inviting them together on stage. Mr. S.V. Prasad, Vice President, Project Advisory and Structured Finance, SBI Capital Markets Limited. For more than 20 years, he has been working in the corporate banking. For more than a decade, he is associated with many large infrastructure financing transactions, totaling several $billion investments across power, telecom, roads, SEZs sectors. He has worked at various capacities in DFI's Industrial Development Bank of India and Small Industries Development Bank of India, worked for 3 years as Vice President Head of Credit at the Bahrain Development Bank in the Kingdom of Bahrain. Our next panelist on this discussion will be Mr. N. Gopalakrishnan Unni, Head Operation Management, the Tata Power Company Limited. He has a total of 32 years of experience in the power industry. He has worked for 28 years in NTPC Limited under various capacities. He has also had a short stint in Lanco O&M Company, during which he helped in establishing O&M practices at various divisions. He is presently working in Tata Power from April 2012. Mr. P.K. Sinha, General Manager, Power Finance Corporation, he will be our next panelist, along with Mr. Sarajit Sen, Managing Director, Doosan Power Services. Mr. Sen has 17 years of boiler engineering and plant commissioning experience in India, China, Zimbabwe, and United Kingdom, with Babcock in India and UK before he took up positions in business operations within the group. Another panelist who is here with us is Mr. Arun Garg, Senior Executive Vice President, Reliance Energy Limited. He is responsible for EPC power project totaling 3,500 milliwatt for overseas government client as Chief Project Director with P&L responsibility. He has been the power industry professional for more than 25 years of rich experience in power infrastructure and petrochemical sector. He pioneered in project development, engineering management, construction management, strategic planning, business development, and contracts management. Mr. Subhash R. Sethi, Advisor to President, University of Petroleum and Energy Studies, will be also on this panel. He is a very well-known power expert with over 45 years of experience in power sector. His rich expertise in all segments of power like generation, transmission, distribution benefited not only Delhi but all in the Indian power sector. He served power industry in various capacities like member Delhi Electricity Regulatory Commission, Delhi Advisor Power Transmission, Government of NCT of Delhi, Director Operations at Delhi Transco Limited, New Delhi, member technical and other capacities. And along with that, we'll have Dr. Boris Gering, Head of Power and Systems Business Unit, TÜV Industry Service Division. In April 2008, Dr. Gering joined TÜV Group. In March 2010, he was appointed as the CEO of the Industry Service Division, responsible for the corporate and strategic business direction of the group's business in the fields of industrial products. Industry Service is the second largest division in the group and has operations in 35 countries with about 5,000 employees globally every year. Well, ladies and gentlemen, these are our panelists. I will request our moderator, along with all our panelists for this session, to kindly join us on stage. Can we have a round of applause for all of them, please?
They got the wrong.
Yeah, we are checking to make sure that everyone is on stage.
So you have the right.
Okay, thank you very much. Over to our moderator for this session, Mrs. Rabi,
Thank
one
you.
more time.
Good afternoon. I know this is the most difficult part of the day, typically. I've had a full lunch. I'm sure you also had it, and you've been through a technical presentation, which I'm sure added a lot of knowledge, but clearly, despite the warning, a lot of people have taken a coffee break, but that's fine. what we are going to do in this final session, really, of the day today, and is to get this wonderful panel here, which represents a cross-section of expertise from across sectors, and with deep understanding of some of the issues, or most of the issues that concern our sector. By way of introduction, I think the only name card that is not available there is for Mr. Sarajit Sen. He is the Managing Director of Dosan Power Services. Apologies for that, but let's get on with what we want to discuss. And we just discussed this before we came in. In the morning, we spoke about revamping existing power plants, renovating them, if you sort of were to put it very simply. And as we end the day, the idea is to discuss moving from renovation, or not just renovation alone, but to capacity expansion by setting up new plants. And therefore, we are talking about greenfield plants. And the idea is to capture 4 or 5 big ticket issues under this head of capacity expansion. One of the numbers that the panel was discussing before we came into this hall was a comparison, and that comparison always happens. The installed capacity in China versus the installed capacity in India. What was not discussed by the panelists, and I was listening to that carefully, was that if you were to divide the population, or look at the population number and the land size, and then use that, I don't know if someone has ever done that kind of working, and then look at the power deficit in this country, or the lack of it, that's, it's a very interesting point to consider. All of the issues that currently exist in the power sector, the panel felt at the start of this that we should focus on 2 or 3 specific themes. So we are going to follow the same model that we did in the morning session, that under the overall ambit of the subject for today's seminar, I will invite the entire panel, and I'll start from my right again, to very quickly give us a brief snapshot of the key headline points that they feel should be discussed and brought out before all of you. And then we will sort of try and open it up to all of you for questioning. We will, of course, try and follow a more stricter timetable this time around because we are running late. So I'll request my entire panel to really deliver their wisdom in bullet points rather than long speeches. And without any further ado, I'm going to go right across to my extreme right to Dr. Gehring for his opening comments in terms of the key issues, the challenges that he sees that the power sector faces. Over to you.
Yes, thank you. I think when it comes to renovation and modernization of power plants, it's very important to consider three things: the technical thing, the commercial, and the environmental aspect. Generally, renovation, modernization makes a lot of sense. Let's say if a power plant has exceeded its design lifetime of, let's say, 25 to 30 years. In this case, it's very important to set up a system, a holistic approach, to look on the system. What are the weak points? What could be made better? What will increase? And this, I think, is the most important point. What will increase the availability of the installation? To increase efficiency is fine. That's one aspect. Efficiency, let's say the fuel consumption related to the megawatt hours output, but the availability is normally the critical point. And there we would recommend to have a systematic approach, make an analysis of the existing equipment and the weak points, and then go for a strategic approach by changing the components, updating the components, and on the final end, and that's what we are doing frequently, monitor it. Well, let's talk about an asset integrity management system, whatever, but to monitor the condition of the installation is extremely important for the availability. So my points in this respect would be availability of the plant. Efficiency is for sure important, but availability of the plant, and also do not forget the environmental aspects by renovation and modernization of those kind of installations. We see it in China, yeah. The focus in the last years was more or less on energy output, yeah. And then now they are facing huge troubles with air quality, yeah. And I think India is on a better way here. Also because you are lucky, your coal is not so, the sulfur content is not so high, of course. But anyway, this has to be recognized. Yeah.
All right, thank you. We'll revisit some of those points that you've just made subsequently during this session. I would now request Mr. Sinha for his opening comments.
Thank you, sir. Well, I'm from Power Finance Corporation. I'll be talking on from the financier's angle, from the lender's perspective. When I look at, and since we are talking about R&M projects, I'll talk about R&M projects only. When we look at an R&M proposal that comes to us for funding, we look at it in a way that it needs to be a financial viable project based on a comprehensive RLA study, wherein when our loan is for, say, 15 years period, tenure, the plant after comprehensive R&M should run for 15 years without any trouble once the R&M activity has been completed, and at a most economical cost. These are the basic things that we look at. And also the other factor, like the guarantee part, like if there should be a single point guarantee that we look at. And the time factor also is very important. When you take up an R&M activity, the shutdown is for a limited period, and all activity needs to be completed within that stipulated. If you take longer time, then the viability of the project goes haywire. So these are the basic 3-4 factors that needs to be taken into consideration, and that's what we look at. And if these things are in place, I don't think we have any issue in funding such projects, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sinha. No issues in funding as long as you create a situation where the R&M exercise is well executed. Thank you very much for that. I'll now turn to Mr. Sarojit Sen for his opening comments.
Good afternoon, everybody. Well, in the morning we did hear about a lot of difference in opinion about new plant, running old plants. I think there is a lot of general confusion in the market because it is bound to happen because we are in an infancy of a healthy power industry in this country. And every other developed world today where we have stable power generation, 24/7, high quality power, they've all gone through these hiccups. In '92, when I was in China commissioning a 700 megawatt plant, we commissioned the plant, but after commissioning, there was only capacity for evacuating 50% of the capacity of that plant. So then they started putting wires to the system. We have the similar issue. We say that we have so much of unutilized capacity because we can't reach power to every nook and corner of the country. So obviously in that situation, we are also moving towards privatization and running generation business in an economic fashion. So it is running as a business rather than a social obligation. So in that respect, with all these drivers coming into the game, whether we should keep an old plant running or put in new plant, only the business can tell you the dynamics. And as every plant has its own issues of coal, how far it is from the pit head, at what price you're buying coal, that will determine what renovation and modernization you would do to improve the efficiency. I would beg to differ from certain opinion in the past that where fuel tariffs are high, efficiency improvement is more important. So there are not all unsuccessful stories, as we have heard from NTPC's presentation. They had some very good renovation and life extension stories at Talcher. Unfortunately, we were part of that as well. We did the boiler design for that. And recently, from our experience at Ahmedabad, there were plants which were 110 megawatts been upgraded to 121 and running at over 100% PLF now. So there are examples where it's profitably running, and obviously every, we need to cut the cloth to suit the needs. So there are ways forward for every business, whether it's new build or R&M.
Thank you very much. Cut the cloth as per specific needs. I will now turn to Mr. S.V. Prasad for his opening comments.
Yeah, I'll probably make it a little wider than simply sticking to R&M, because the issues and the challenges that we are facing, the issues and challenges we are seeing today are enormous in terms of scale and in terms of the exposure of banking sector is concerned. To give you a perspective, about out of 250 gigawatts of capacity currently that is there, private sector has come up in a very big way, and today you have about 50 gigawatts of thermal capacity installed by private sector. And we are looking at, like if you look at capacity additions, predominantly we did about 20 gigawatt capacity in each plan, but only during the last plan, that is 11th plan, we managed to do more than 50 gigawatt, roughly about 55 gigawatt capacity has been added. That is almost 3 times the capacity addition that happened in the previous plans. Similarly, if you look at 12th plan today, we are already at 45 gigawatts capacity addition. All this capacity addition is a good story. There are a lot of investment happening. But if we look at some of the aspects, like how do we forecast demand and how the demand is being managed? See, deficit, peak deficit as well as energy deficit has been perennial in India. If you look at even last decade, a peak deficit always has been in double digits. And same thing with energy deficit. But in the recent past, it has come down to single digit numbers. We are looking at currently about 4.5% kind of. But if you look at the overall sector, why are we facing challenges today? Is because it doesn't operate on commercial principles. If you're looking at the purchase cost, average purchase cost of power is 4 rupees plus on all India basis. But whereas when they sell it at 3 rupees plus. So straight away you're talking about 1 rupee deficit. So multiplied by about 1,000 billion units, so you get the picture. That is the quantum of losses that we are incurring. What are the reasons? Reasons are varied. So unless until we operate on commercial basis, commercial principles, things won't change. Unfortunately, these things have evolved over a period of time. It's not just that they have happened over time, over 1 year, 2 years. It's happened over a decade. Predominantly, distribution is a concurrent subject where the investment is not happening, whereas we are predominantly generation-centric investment is happening. But all the collection, all the money that is to be pumped into the system, whether it is generation or transmission, whoever needs to be paid, it has to come from the end consumer. That is where the stumbling block is. Unless we look at it and do a whole lot of revamp, about 8 trillion rupee banking sector exposure is there towards power sector. Majority of it, I won't say all of it, majority of it is in different levels of stress. So unless these things are resolved faster, future investments by the lenders would be a challenge, because it would be seen as a sector, a difficult sector, where you would end up with NPA, so why we should go forward. So this is something that needs to be seen.
Thank you very much. Clearly, that is perhaps the most scary scenario for our power sector. I've covered power for many years now. I started covering it 14 years back. And in my lifetime alone, I have seen 2 power sector bailouts, so to say. and both with only partial success at least. But we'll try and come to that later. I'll now turn to Mr. Arun Garg, Senior Executive Vice President at Reliance Energy. I think he also doesn't have a name card here.
It was there, but it could not get accommodated.
Okay. Mr. Garg, your comments.
Yeah, good afternoon. Actually, I'm that part of Reliance which does external projects. Hello. Yeah, I'm that part of Reliance which does external projects for government clients. So as Reliance EPC turnkey services, we have put up around 3,500 megawatt of capacity for Haryana, for West Bengal, there is DVC, and for UP. UP, we had a balance of plant turnkey with BHEL, and we have put up capacities with Chinese equipments. So my learning has been in the area of contract management with government. The challenge is challenges have been since earlier we are basically owners and operators of our own projects, but I think in 2004 we decided that we'll do external EPC also. So we didn't have the qualifications, so we competed very hard to get contracts, EPC turnkey contracts. So we were very, very price competitive, and we have put up capacities. The learnings, if I just put it very simply, have been that we could not carry actually one learning from one project to another. So the mistakes that we made, because we took all the projects almost at the same time. The thing is that when we bid for a EPC contract, a turnkey EPC contract, sometimes we make many wrong assumptions on the costing part, and it is a real challenge to do a very competitive EPC project. Like our costs were around 3.2 crore per megawatt. So we just lost some money also. Difficult part is again closing. So whatever mistakes that you do, putting our project, closing becomes very difficult with the client. And again, the financial health and the enabling environment created by the client also is very important. Like DVC, I was in the panel, we were discussing that DVC project. I'm doing DVC Raghunathpur. So the first phase, we are actually now completed. We ran the unit at 600 megawatt. But again, DVC had to still tie up coal and water for the project. And they also started phase 2. But what we are finding is that we are stuck up in the phase 1 also. We cannot, because we are waiting for coal and water to complete the project. So enabling environment, financial health of the utilities, government utilities, very important to complete the project. Projects get delayed. So all these things need to be tied up. And these are some of the areas that is of, and again, I just want to tell you that Reliance has gone very aggressive with the Chinese equipments for government clients as well as for own projects, for Sasan, for our Rosa project, for this. And our experience is not bad. So because we have gone full scale, taking Chinese equipments, offering it as a solution for ourselves and for external clients. So I think with this, I would...
Thank you. We will revisit some of these points, Mr. Garg, that you mentioned, especially one of the issues about how a private entity has to deal with the government in the power sector, both at the state and the central level. I'll now request Mr. Sethi for his opening remarks.
I will divide my couple of minutes covering the utility perspective, regulator's perspective, and the shortcomings in the Electricity Act. From the utility point of view, renovation and modernization is the low-hanging fruits. You can do it quickly, at a cheaper cost, and you can get the results immediately. The new plant takes about 5 to 7 years to build. A renovation can be completed in 2 years' time. And the costs are, depending upon how well you have maintained the plant, it could be a thermal power plant, could be renovated from 1.2 crores to 3 crores, depending upon how bad your equipment is or how good your equipment is. Couple of years ago, the power sector till 2003 Act came in was not treated on as a profit center each of the units. The restructuring of the power sector of the three verticals of generation, transmission, and distribution, once they were segregated, each one became a profit center and they have to fend for themselves. In the integrated mode, generation was the most neglected. It was the distribution which was where you come in contact with the public, or the powers to be was given the priority, but without investment, the distribution sector was also neglected because the money was only coming from the exchequer or from the budgetary spot. After the Electricity Act came in 2003, and the electricity became a business and a regulated business, the role of regulators became very important. Utilities could not do what they felt like. Everything had to be approved through the ARR, that is annual revenue requirement. The tariffs were fixed. The returns are limited to 15.5 or 16% on your equity, and so on. Today, even somebody wants to invest any money, whether it is a generating company or a distribution company, they need to take the approval of the regulator. And with the capacity which is available in the country, which is surplus, let me tell you, it is a myth that India is short of power. India has an installed capacity of over 250,000 megawatt. The peak demand which is serviced is about 140,000-45,000 megawatt. Where is the remaining going? That's the question which everybody has in mind. About 1/12 of the capacity has to be under maintenance at any given time because each boiler has to be maintained as per safety regulations, which takes about 30 days. Then comes that the non-availability or the shortage of coal. Power sector grew by about 60% in the last 10 years. The Coal India production went up by 6%. So remaining was to be either imported, and if it is imported, the bottom of the pyramid is the consumer. He has to pay, and the tariff has to be cost reflective. It's a chain, it's a business between the consumer who is to pay and the fuel supplier. The rest is a chain which converts the fuel into power, transmits it, distributes it, does metering, billing, and collection, and that lies the catch. For example, in Delhi, there are 45 lakh consumers. Each one meter has to be read, bill delivered, money collected. That is the biggest challenge. It is unlike the telecom sector, where you can read the meter, send the bill, disconnect from remote. Here he has to go and disconnect at site, and the consumers can be very tricky. Now comes to the Electricity Act. Being a concurrent subject, one of my panelists have suggested, and it is a fact, the central government policies may be whatever they are. These are to be implemented by the states. And the states do not come on board, it is a failure story. Land acquisition, environmental clearance, forest, tariff, right of way for a transmission line, everything has to be done with the blessings of the powers to be in the states.
At the state level, yeah.
And then, if you invest under APDRP or Rajiv Gandhi Vidyut Kari Yojana or something, the assets are idling because the distribution companies do not have money or not allowed to buy the power, and that is again affecting the financial health of the sector person.
Right.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now for the last opening comments, Mr. Gopalakrishnan.
Thank you, Siddharth. Sri Sethi has almost given the perspective of the industry. So while looking at the banner, I was thinking about the heading, Safe Future Now. Exactly, I did not understand the meaning. But I feel the present itself is not safe for the power industry. Maybe some utilities like NDPC may be enjoying a good profit kind of situation. But many of the private sectors, including Tata Power, are in the red. The finances are very bad, we are not getting money, or whatever capacity, sir has told, a lot of capacity has been added. The last 10 years after the Electricity Act of 2003, there is a big jump in capacity addition. Whatever R&M we are doing, it is in minuscule compared to that. But that capacity, there is no takers as such for them. For example, in our Mundra, first UMPP, which we have commissioned ahead of time at Mundra, all the 830 megawatts are available, but people don't want that much money. Even though we sell at 2 rupees 50 paise, there are no takers. So we are able to sell as per the requirement of the CERC or the norm. 80% we are operating it, incurring a loss. Keeping to the true values of the Tata, still we are running it, but every day we are incurring a heavy loss. Recently, when NDPC proposed to buy out some of the private sector power plants, I understand around 29 to 30 private sector companies were ready to sell the units to NDPC. After doing due diligence, they did not take much because most of them does not have proper coal linkages, proper power evacuation linkages are not there. So, sir has told, Sri Sethi has told that even though the Electricity Act has liberalized or de-licensed the generation, that has not happened with the evacuation. Transmission distribution still lacking. I pay 18 rupees per unit of generation in diesel generation in my society, whereas we are worried to pay 3 rupees or 4 rupees generator. So, these are the main concerns. He asked us what are the main concerns. We are not able to utilize the capacity because of whatever the reason, that is one thing. But I have been asked to talk about the performance. Coming to the performance, we always enjoyed the full recovery of our tariff before the ABT tariff before 2000 in the KP Rao committee. If you generate 68.5%, we used to have full recovery, pass through, as they call it. So nobody worried about the performance or efficiency. Heat rate was not a big thing at that time. Everybody was after the PLF. If you generate more PLF, you will get incentive. So we used to make money. But now the things have changed. Now performance is driven by the regulator. In CERC, about 6.5% plus design norm in 2004-9. 914, they made it again, 914, 6.5. Now it's 4.5%. If you see the average, most of the units in the country operate 5 to 10% extra compared to the design heat rate. Why? Because of design call change. We are not operating with the design call. None of the units are operating with the design call. And the CERC made this norm based on the full load PLF of enjoyed by many of the NDPC or some other units. But who is operating at full load now? Partial loading, if I operate at 60% or 70% load, I will lose 40 kilocalories directly, 2%. I am losing 2% on partial loading, around 2% on coal. So 4% gone. So there is no margin at all. So that is the main concern of the power sector. So whatever low-hanging fruits, whatever in the morning they were saying, we can do some operational corrections. But for that, optimization, what they call. If you want to do a good performance optimization, good monitoring is required. Good monitoring means what? Good instrumentation. None of our old turbines or generator or even transformers. Transformers are burning like anything nowadays, but we don't have good monitoring systems for transformers. If you want to put it, I have to get the permission of our regulator. Regulator normally does not agree. Like Sri Prasad has told, everybody want to see that the losses are minimized. They were buying at 4 rupees, selling at 3 rupees. So who will be ready to buy at a higher price? So I know when I was in NDPC, people used to say, "हमको imported coal का power नहीं चाहिए." NDPC government allow किया था, they imported a lot of coal, kept as stock 2-3 million tons of coal, but बाद में people refused to take that power. Now the situation might have slightly changed, but the market is still very difficult now. Now the norm-based tariff has gone. Now again, it is a competitive tariff. Merit order, whoever is able to say, I know some utilities, 2 rupee 30 paise they are able to sell, but there is no taker. There are wheeling charges or some other issues. This is the main issue which is causing a problem in the power industry. Performance, but there was a debate in the morning, Sri Jain was talking about R&M. R&M, what we could decide is, like it was already clearly explained, if you are able to restrict the R&M cost to 1 crore per megawatt or something, and you can extend the life to next 20, 25 years, and the takeoff is ensured, then you can go for R&M. And if the cost is 3 rupees or 3 crore, 4 crore per megawatt, there is no point in putting in R&M. But whenever you go for R&M, please go for an enhanced capacity, an enhanced heat rate. Not just by changing A to A is not an R&M.
Right.
Sen Saab is shaking his head. But there are many vendors who can give a enhanced capacity plus enhanced heat rate. If you change the turbine cylinder, heat rate can be improved by 1 or 2%. Such kind of R&M only will be help in the long run. So I think these things can be discussed.
Okay, thank you very much. Clearly, one of the biggest points that has emerged is from your remarks especially, and if we take a summary of all the other remarks, that is it the case that the power sector in India, despite the huge demand, or at least the demand that seems to exist on paper, given the population size and the needs of a growing economy, what kind of situation are we in where we are debating the fact that there are no margins at all, and that this sector is, its output product is retailed at a price below cost. And therefore, if you sort of take all the issues and apply a simple theory, so, you know, prior to us coming up on the panel, a point was mentioned about the fact that the deposit that we give on our to our supplier, there is a 6% interest that is paid by the supplier. And it just struck me at that time that for the millions of post-paid telephone connections in India who have similarly have to put a deposit in, there is no mandated or assured interest that is given. Output pricing in that sector is regulated, but the regulator's concept is a word called forbearance, where the regulator only steps in if there is a threat of market abuse, domination, or of overpricing, or unethical tariff practices. The regulator in India in the telecom sector, and I am deliberately sort of making this comparison, in the entire existence of telecom in India, including from the days when we issued our first private license in 1994, there is not a single case so far of the telecommunications regulator, and that is only at the central level because the subject is only on the central list and not on the concurrent list. The regulator of telecom in India has never had to intervene with regard to tariffs. So therefore, if an outsider were to look at this sector, the power sector today, and from one of the points that was mentioned with regard to regulation, an outsider and a non-power sector person like me would say that one of the biggest disasters, apart from the fact that there are no margins at all to have in the business, apart from the fact that our coal production, despite the huge number of reserves we have, is abysmal, is the fact that there is regulatory capture and far too much regulatory oversight than what is actually needed. Because if you apply a very general sense and basic economic understanding to all that we have heard from this panel, the one key message that comes in, that this is a sector for the government, managed by the government, priced by the government, controlled by the government, where the output product and its price is also influenced by the government, while the consumer is happily going to pay 5 or 6 times for quality power, which does not go away, the example that you made of 16, 17 rupees. So that is the summary of what our panel has said. Let's now try and drive 3 or 4 of these points alone, and I know there are like 3 dozen points that we can discuss, but we won't be able to do that. The first point that I want to touch upon here is a mention by one of our panelists here where he said that the cost of renovation is lower, the time of renovation is also lower versus the fact and the problems that we see in new capacity expansion. Mr. Sethi, you made that point. And you also added the point about roughly 1/3 of our capacity installed base being idle at any given point of time, if you were to, today, at this point of time. Now, is that something that we will have to live with? Is that a reality that we have to live with? And if so, for how much time? And if you agree that this is a reality that we have to live with, and I'm going to open up this to the entire audience, you know, the question basically would be, should we live with this reality? But in case it is inevitable, when do you see it changing? Because clearly, this is not a sustainable model.
Let me tell you, problems are known, solutions are known, it's only will to implement.
But at multiple levels.
Let me just qualify it. I've just made a generic statement. Coal is available in plenty in the world market. Can be imported. The cost of generation with imported coal.
But what happens when a country like Indonesia decides to stop that?
I will cover that also. When ultra mega power plants of Mudra by Tatas and Adani was put up, they bought the mines in Indonesia as a backwards energy for 25, 30 years. The coal pricing was $35 per ton at the FOB level. Indonesian government took cue from Indian government when Indian government said that all minerals are the national assets and we have the right to fix the price. When it was 1.97 to 4.2, the case is well known, the fight between the two Ambani brothers, the Indian government took the view that it's a national asset, we'll price it. Indonesian government also took the cue, they said any export which takes place from Indonesia will be at the international benchmark prices. And the international benchmark prices, when there was a big demand, it went up from $35 a ton to $100 a ton.
But I am interrupting you for a reason, because commodity prices would fluctuate based on business cycles. The point I'm trying to drive at, and you must pardon me for interrupting you here, the point I'm trying to drive at is that one example or a couple of other examples are well known. If we look at the future, that is a challenge that we face, and it would perhaps remain in the future too. There would be uncertainties. There would be one particular country which decides to do something. Russia did something in the gas market, as we know. Given all of that, is the scenario going to be of minimal capacity expansion and therefore a focus that the government needs to only keep on renovation and modernization? I'm trying to drive that point. Or should we look or believe, as common citizens, we believe that the answer to our problems would be through massive and rapid capacity, new capacity addition? That's the point I'm trying to ask you.
I will take 2 more minutes to explain before with this one. The cost of imported coal-based generation went up from 2 rupees 20 paisa to 2 rupees 80 paisa. With the international benchmark prices, it will keep on fluctuating. The fuel cost is a pass-through in India by the regulator, Central Electricity Regulatory Commission. Now, the solution is, till the time Coal India or Indian coal production increases, the imported coal is allowed to be used and the consumers have to pay, because he'll pay 4 rupees 50 paisa or 5 rupees vis-a-vis 17 or 18 rupees per unit, which everybody is paying happily. But the powers to be do not allow the tariff to go up to be remunerative. And you said that the Ahluwalia Committee report, 50,000 megawatt crores were under recovery was recovered. Now it is all 3 lakh crores of under recovery is being serviced through the consumers and the government picking up. And let me tell you, when government gives a subsidy, it is doing a very bad thing for the economy, which everybody knows, because you pay 100, you collect 100 rupees and 30 rupees goes for collecting that money, and you get back subsidy as 70 only. And until unless we overcome the fact of that we are going to get subsidized power, it is my money minus 30%. So the solution lies allowing the tariffs to be fixed, which is remunerative, and the fuel cost as a pass-through.
No, Mr. Siri, I'll have to disagree there. You know, because this is a terminology, and I say this to this entire room because the power sector is so used to working for this aspect at least. I'm not talking about, let's say, manufacturing of equipment. It is so used to working within the government and the appendages of the government that it is willing to live with a terminology of tariff having been fixed. I once again repeat my point. Why should the person who is responsible for input costs, for business risks, for management effort, be pricing his product only on the say-so of a regulator who, if you allow me, with great respect, I would say, is essentially an armchair activist and not a practitioner at that point of time. And if you look at global examples in developing economies which have moved to developed status, this is an issue which no one from the industry says because we are perhaps so scared of the overall political environment. The fact is that you have other comparable models in our economy, not strictly comparable, where less government has meant better efficiency.
I'll make one comment. If the electricity is allowed to be used as a commodity, not as a political commodity, the sector will prosper, there won't be any shortages, people
So
will
close
get...
down the CERC for a start?
No, it is not, because the
Because
question
really,
is
what difference has the CERC made to power availability in this country?
No.
I think it is just a place for retired bureaucrats to serve
It is-
after their age of retirement is over.
That is that is very true. 95% of the distribution companies are still government owned.
Okay.
That is there.
Mr. Sinha wanted to come in.
See, I want to add on what you said. Regulator is required because the present electricity scenario, we have different type of players. In order to bring them all at one platform, we need to have a regulator. Otherwise, tariff will go haywire. Someone will sell it higher, someone will...
So why is that a problem? No, why is there a problem if
So what
tariffs
is
go
happening
here?
in merchant sales? You see what's happening. Sometimes it goes to 7 rupees a unit. Sometimes it comes down to 3 rupees a
So
unit.
I'm saying, have you seen political protests? Has someone burned down a power company's office? Has a distribution utility been burned down? Has a politician's car been stoned for that? But if we are discussing the economics of a crucial subject like power, it relates to people and therefore politics to that limited extent comes in. We are not discussing about political change, but the politics, the economics of that, why is it a concern? Why is it at all a concern where the industry itself says, let us submit ourselves to this all-knowing, all-powerful God and let him determine what will be the final output price? Which the political, the purchaser or the licensor, whatever term that you use, will tell you to underprice. So, you know, this won't change for 100 years, Mr.
The
Sinha.
regulator takes care of the public, basically.
Really, if there is power is not available, is the regulator taking care of the public and the economy, Mr. Sinha?
See, the regulator's
The fact is,
job
should
is
the
not to see the availability of power. Their job is to see what I understand. Right. So, yeah, I agree with him. Like, we are going in a different direction.
Okay.
We were talking about R&M. And as you, I'll come back to the point of R&M basically. What you said that around 1 lakh megawatt of power is idle, and what should be the action way forward? Whether to add more capacity, keep on adding more capacity, or to take up R&M and develop these activities. My suggestion to the House is that we had, a Government of India had a program earlier in 9th plan, an AG and SP program. Accelerated Generation and Supply program, where Government of India had given a thrust to R&M by giving a 3% interest subsidy for R&M activities. So the utility had this thing incentive that if they take up R&M activities, whatever interest rate they borrow, they'll get, Government of India will pass on a 3% subsidy to them. So a lot of R&M activities started all over the country, and that can be revived. So a recommendation from this summit can be that to the Government of India to revive that AG and SP policy and pass on some subsidy so that R&M activities can be taken up on priority, and the idle capacity which is lying around 1 lakh megawatt can come up at
Okay.
faster speed.
Some
I
quick
want
comments.
to, I want to actually respond to Siddharth's comment. Regulator is needed. Since you just pointed out in telecom also you have a regulator who's making sure that the forbearance and all that is taken care and all the consumers' interests are protected. Okay, same here also, no difference about it. It is just that the regulator is not allowed to function in this country. That is what is happening. If you look at majority of the regulators, any state, see, it is the state regulator's job to fix the tariffs. If there is a political intervention and he is not allowed to function, and the institutions are so weakened that 7 years, 8 years, 10 years, they are just dictated by the masters not to do their respective jobs, the whole thing is lost.
That is
so that is where is the point. The point is the regulation has been weakened. Regulator has been weakened. It is not that regulator is not needed.
Okay, excellent point, Mr. Prasad, and thank you for making that, because clearly the point that we are trying to make here is we've got one sort of so-called big ticket item that the regulatory infrastructure as it may exist for the power sector has been weakened, has been compromised, and the regulator has not functioned properly enough and therefore failed to deliver. I'm going to turn, did you want to come in? At least not on the panel. This panel will settle its disputes आपस में ही. But we'll try and cover. Okay. Okay, just give me 2 minutes. Honestly, I will come back to you too, sir. I'll come back to you. Just let him speak, and I will come back to you. We'll open up right away. Just 2 minutes.
Well, as we said that the power industry is evolving and the regulations and commission, the regulatory commission is trying to do its things as it is done in other places. But in a current situation where we have just now said there's almost 70, 80 gigawatts which is being not utilized, but that means what? The current available grid distribution has almost 40% excess power. So obviously it's not a conducive situation for the generator businesses.
For new investments in generation?
Yes, no, not at all. And as
so
a
it is not conducive. So let's get this in point form. One was the regulation point. The second point that you are making is clearly that it is not conducive at this point of time for overall India to invest in new generation capacity. Okay, so that is point number. I quickly want to go to the other two panelists before I go to Mr. Sethi again. And this is to try and see if they are going to comment about this regulatory capture as I see it and believe has happened in the power sector progressively. Do you agree with this contention? What would you want to say? Quickly, first you and then. Can I just take this? Yeah, it's working.
No, regulator as being debated here, we cannot put the entire fault on the regulator alone, because regulator as well as the generating company quote or fix the prices based on some assumptions. Okay. Again, I'm saying when a UMPP quotes some low tariff, it is based on some takeoff, this much sale will be guaranteed, this, because they will make on some balance diagrams only, they will fix the price and tariff. Regulator also, as I told, takes some assumption, but sometimes assumptions are going wrong. So they see always based on the past data, 5-year data, but the future is not like the past.
Okay.
That is the problem.
Okay, Mr. Garg.
I just want to respond to this one.
Yeah, after let me know. Sure, you come in then.
Actually, Reliance is doing some generation projects also, like Sasan is one, and Rosa. So in Sasan, because I think this gentleman was mentioning that S.V. Prasadji, that 4 rupees is the cost of generation, and you are getting 3. Sasan, we are just generating at around 1 rupee 19 as a levelized tariff for 25 years. Okay, but we are also, requesting for some tariff concession, because what is actually happening is that certain assumptions have gone wrong. There have been project delays. We want to survey, so we are not asking 4 rupees. We are asking something less. But again, regulator come in the way, contracts come in the way. So the thing is that even good generating assets, so we are not asking 4 rupees. We are asking something less. So it is a real challenge that power sector at this point of time is really not remunerative. I agree with Mr. Sen that being in generation business, even if you supply competitive power, okay, like getting money from the, even after the regulator regulates and gives you a tariff, getting the money from the utilities also is one more challenge. I think one thing is just tariff fixation, but even after that, getting money from the utilities. Like I'm just saying, mentioning the case of DVC, I think it was discussed. We are putting project for Damodar Valley. Damodar Valley, they are not getting around 8,000, 9,000 crore, they are saying is getting accumulated by Jharkhand. So the total financial utilities are in mess right now. Right. So this is the point that I want to make. So I'm just going even beyond tariff fixation by the regulators to the financial health of the utilities to support generation.
Okay, you wanted to make a comment, Mr. Prasad.
See, again, coming back to the regulator, because there is a regulatory failure, APTEL has recognized the fact, and APTEL has passed that suo moto, every regulator has to revise tariffs April every year. They have understood this, that the regulators have created this kind of a mess, and they said, irrespective of whatever happens, every April you are supposed to look at the tariffs and do your job.
Okay, they look at the tariffs every April. Okay, now the third major point, and I will come to you. You want to comment on this point? Okay, can we have some mics in the audience? We'll now open up to brief interventions and questions. I am allowing interventions, but please keep in mind that we have just 10 minutes now.
In the recent past, what is happening, that states and other companies like NTPC, etc., they are not purchasing power for the producers. They are saving their money. So what is my suggestion is that this regulator commission, they must bring out a regulation sort of thing, that some particular hours shutdown shall be there, not more than that. Because these states, etc., they are saving their money. Now, in that condition, what will happen, that Tata, this Mundra, they are producing this power, and it is not being sold, because states and NTPC, they are not purchasing power. So, if they bring out some regulation sort of, that particular hours shutdown shall be there, not more than that will be there, then they will be able to sell their power.
Okay, there was a comment that was made that the power business is not a social service, and I'm going to keep struggling and turn this discussion towards a larger discussion on the political economy of power in India, because essentially if you get the larger macroeconomics right, you can then trust and believe that a combination of human ingenuity, public service and basic economics will drive the fundamentals properly if you get the top end of the matrix right. At least that is what conventional wisdom would have us to believe. If there are, I will come back to you, sir. Are there any questions before? Okay, I saw one hand there. I wanted to, okay, quickly. Any other person who has not asked a question, I would like to give them a preference, but I will then come back to you. Okay, the gentleman there.
My question goes to our Shri Prasad Sahab, who is for Vice President. So, you quoted that the purchase price is 4 rupees and the selling price is 3 rupees. How this sector can survive? This data I don't agree, because we consumer, we are paying 6 rupees for the electricity. So, at Haryana, obviously there are some 200 or 100 units which are being given at subsidy rate, that is 4 rupees, not less than that. If you are charging 6 rupees for more than 200 units, you charge for whole why you are giving the subsidy? But once you are charging 6 rupees from consumer, why this sector is crying now?
Okay, we get that. Mr. Prasad, you,
Just to quickly tell you the truth, basically you have different sources of power generating power at different prices. You have power projects which are power plants which are generating power at 50 paisa also. You have plants which are generating at 16 rupees also. What I have talked about is average pooled price. When I said average pooled price, when you look at all these sources of power and then divide by the number of units, then this is what you would get, the unit price. So this is 4 rupees is what is the procurement price for a distribution company. I'm talking about all India basis from all the sources.
okay. Mr. Sen, I want to take up that issue, that power, and hopefully this will be the last point that we will discuss today. Power is not a social service. Its availability is almost like a fundamental right, if I may say so, because it is so essential to performing all your other duties and availing of all your other rights. Without power, even that won't be possible. If it is not a social service, how, and tell us honestly, how much do you think we have progressed in the recent past? But more importantly, are you hopeful with the new scenario, with the new administrative system that is taking place, at least at the central level, and hopefully in different states? Today is a day when two very important industrial states in India are selecting a new government. We did not see electricity figure as a major election issue there, except for the fact that some promises may have been made. But none of this deep economic issues ever make it to that election. So given all those realities, are you hopeful that we will move away from the fact that it is not a social service, but it will be delivered as a viable social need? How soon do you think we can get there?
Well, this is where the government will comes in, right? So obviously, these things of deregulating. Initially, we had all the state electricity boards, which have been broken down into things. These are all in the right steps. But as we said that, the regulatory commission is also constrained in certain ways, right? Today, if he wants to increase the tariff by 50% to make the whole industry viable, he's under the compulsion because people don't want to pay that sudden 50% rise, right? It is a political issue. It becomes a political issue. It has happened everywhere else.
Do you ever see it not being a political issue, and in fact, to repeat my pet theme, that it being taken out of political ownership as an issue?
Well, if you look at the situation where we are, just now we said that we have almost 30% surplus power which is not being utilized. But the guy at the end of the wire is not getting quality power.
He would laugh at us if we would tell him that we have surplus power.
If I tell this to a developed economy, they will laugh at us, right?
Yeah.
Because the way the regulator works.
People on the streets in India would laugh if you tell them we have surplus power.
Yes, exactly. So and that has become the reality, but we still go ahead and drive because there are other drivers to say that, look, I keep on installing new power stations because that is what shows that the growth trend. But I have got capacities idling, almost 30% idling, and I have got no 24/7 power, poor quality of power. In an ideal grid condition, what we try to achieve is basically a surplus, a grid surplus spinning reserve of 15% surplus, which will tide over the sudden demand and changes and failures.
Much of the issues that the common man of India and the paying middle classes, I make this point, the paying middle classes would never buy 95% of what we have spoken here, because clearly they don't bother, they are willing to pay. They are paying much more for off-grid diesel power.
And they are not getting, and they are paying, they have the paying capacity, but power is not reaching there.
Mr. Sethi, from your considerable experience, and I would request the entire panel to come in again because we'll close very shortly. In some ways, this point about power not being a social service, despite, I would argue that every few years a new administration comes and pays lip service to this idea of social service. You have some moves that are made. You have changes that are made not just to the names of the schemes, but those you get newer schemes. You have newer kinds of bailouts. You have different issues with regard to fuel. We have seen this happen on almost like a regular cyclical basis. In the simplest of terms, will it be possible for us to tell you that are you confident that we will move away from social service to a situation where power will be available for all and it will be viable for the consumer to consume that power and for everybody else to generate and produce and deliver it to him? How soon would that happen, if at all?
Let me tell you, with the one point which was mentioned, that in last year, Ministry of Power, when they approached APTEL to issue direction to all the regulators to approve the tariff, every year, whether the distribution company files the tariff petition or not, is the turning point. Today, some of the 95% distribution companies being government-owned didn't file their tariff petition for years together with impunity, okay? Now with this order coming from, the regulator has started issuing the tariff orders without the distribution company filing the ARR, where the state governments, the powers to be, have become uncomfortable. But he has no choice, because if he doesn't do it, he's hauled up by the APTEL tribunal for contempt of court.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
Now, one more point on this one. The government of India, as I understand, are quite serious about making an amendment in the Electricity Act, which makes the fuel cost as a pass-through, whether it is Indian coal or the imported coal price, which will be the turning point. The moment that amendment is passed, maybe in the next winter session, 90% of the problems of the power sector will be over.
Okay, on that extremely positive note, we are going to end this session. I know there might have been more points. This session could have probably taken another 2 hours, but clearly on that one point, that if you allow complete pass-through, you would probably have a situation where much of the ills of this sector would be taken care for, the fundamental being that if you have money, everything else will fall in place. That would be the fundamental point. Thank you very much once again to the entire panel for being here. Apologies to those who could not be accommodated in the discussion from the audience, but hopefully it's been worth our combined time. Thank you very much.
Thank you to all our panelists and, of course, to our moderator. May I request Mr. Niranjan Nadkarni to kindly present a token of appreciation to all our panelists. Ladies and gentlemen, let's hear it for everyone on stage, please. And I'll request our panelists to kindly step in front so that we can have a nice group photograph. Once again, thank you to all our panelists on stage and to our moderator for this session. Well, ladies and gentlemen,